In early February 2000, when the Ivory Coast unexpectedly tumbled out of the African Cup of Nations tournament at the first hurdle, the country's military junta took the extraordinary step of detaining the entire squad at a military training camp in the Ivory Coast. Since the military junta had staged a coup d'etat on Christmas Eve of 1999, it had not shied away from trying on new roles besides politics in Ivorian society. And so in this case, it decided to meddle into footballing affairs in order to teach the Ivorian players a civic lesson because they had shown indiscipline at this particular footballing tournament. For many decades, Côte d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast, a former French colony which achieved independence in 1960, was a beacon of prosperity and stability in West Africa. After the death of its longtime leader, Félix Houphouët-Boigny in 1993, Henry Konan Bédier, who had been Speaker of the National Assembly, took over. Unfortunately, under Bédier, the country's economy began to dissolve into complete disarray. In Côte d'Ivoire, dissatisfaction remained high in the academic community and was growing rapidly among the overworked and underpaid military ranks. General Robert Guei would launch Côte d'Ivoire's first ever coup d'etat on Christmas Eve 1999 and in so doing toppled the government of Henry Konan Bédier. His takeover on Christmas Eve 1999 seemed a welcome change in Côte d'Ivoire. Impressively, he claimed to have no interest in clinging to power. Yet within a few months, General Robert Guei had fallen into the mold of many other military leaders and transformed himself into a power-hungry man. For those not in the know, the African Cup of Nations, AFCON, is the most prestigious football competition in Africa. The 2000 edition of the tournament was co-hosted by Ghana and Nigeria, who jointly replaced Zimbabwe as host. Just like in 1998, the field of 16 teams was split into 4 groups of 4. Côte d'Ivoire's national team, the Elephants as they are nicknamed, was made up mostly of Ivorians who played for high-paying European teams. Unfortunately, at this tournament, the Ivorian team was eliminated after only 3 matches, that is, in the first round of the competition. In this particular edition, they had managed to beat Ghana with a respectable 2-0 scoreline, but only managed a draw against the much smaller nation of Togo, and were then thrashed 3-0 by Cameroon, who were one of the best on the continent. According to fans, the Ivorians had performed so spiritlessly. And as far as the military junta was concerned, the fact that the national team was kicked out after only the first round could not be tolerated. Côte d'Ivoire had, after all, won the tournament in 1992, and so to go out in the first round was viewed as nothing less than a national humiliation. On arriving home after the elimination, the players and staff had probably expected to encounter nothing more serious than a few disappointed fans and an awkward press conference at the airport. Instead, they found themselves being detained by the military authorities in an army camp. The country's angry military rulers detained the players at the Zambakro School for the Maintenance of Peace. At the camp, the players were allegedly stripped of their passports and their freedom, not to mention their cell phones. It is said that these football stars spent 2 days at the military camp taking lessons in civics and patriotism, as well as doing push-ups. It was a pretty grim setup, and like a prison, they weren't allowed to leave. Throughout the detention, some government officials said the players were being held for their own protection from angry football fans, though there were no reported protests or threats to the team. But reports soon leaked out that the leader of the junta, General Robert Guei, himself a football fan, had been angered by the team's insipid performance. Some officials, like Issa Sangare Yereso, the junta's spokesman, were a bit more honest and forthcoming in their answers for the reason why the national team had been detained. Yereso was quoted saying that, after being humiliated in the first round, the Elephants needed to be taught a civic lesson because the players were indisciplined. It became apparent that very few Ivorians cared about the welfare and the whereabouts of the national team. In fact, most Ivorians appeared to think that a small detention was the least the footballers deserved. Some friends of the players did, however, decide to make their way to the military camp to try to obtain the squad's early and safe release. One of them was a former footballer, Basile Boli, who traveled to the military camp where he was assured by officials that the players would be released. Basile Boli had pointed out the obvious to the junta that most of the players had contracts with clubs in Europe who would soon be asking some very tricky questions as to the whereabouts of their valuable assets. The then FIFA president Sepp Blatter even contacted Ivory Coast military authorities to try to find out about the players. After a few days, the players were eventually freed, unharmed, but no doubt traumatized by their bizarre punishment. But the players were to have one more detour before they were fully released. They were taken to Abidjan for a dressing down from General Robert Gueye, the head of state. At this particular meeting, General Gueye was livid and furious and was even quoted as saying, "I asked that you be taken there so you could reflect a while. You behaved unworthily. You should have avoided us such shame. Next time you will stay there for military service. You will be sent to the barracks until a sense of civic pride gets into your heads." After the dressing down by the head of state, the players were eventually let go. Now, as you can probably imagine, the players expressed their relief to be returning home and to be returning to their European clubs after having been locked up at this military camp. As for General Robert Gueye, he was a candidate in the October 2000 presidential elections. The general was so determined to win that, against all the evidence, he proclaimed himself the victor and tried to steal the vote from Laurent Gbagbo, the only other serious contender. But General Gueye had misjudged his own popularity and in the face of an apparently popular uprising was forced to flee. General Gueye was shot dead on September 19, 2002, the day when a failed coup d'etat was launched against Laurent Gbagbo in Abidjan. Don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.